have a good time here. I love talking to everybody. Like you said, my name is Teri White. On my book, this is Teri French. I got married last October, and that's the same time the book came out. I didn't have time to change my name, so. I started PIT, which is the Paranormal Investigation Team in Tulsa. And we started that I started investigating back in '98. And it's kind of an interesting story. I'm in property management. I've been doing it for 13 years. I love it. I can't give out the place that I manage because I still work there. I like my job. But I was working at this place for 8 years. In the first 5 years, everything kind of was normal. Nothing ever weird ever happened there. All of a sudden, there's all this weird stuff starting to happen. About 5 years into working there. One day, I was with a prospect, and I just filled up my business cards, holder with business cards, and I went to go grab one to give to somebody, and they were gone. And I had just filled them up, so I know they were there. When I did that, I went and grabbed them out of my book, put them back in my holder, didn't think twice about it, grabbed a date and one, they went on their way. Went into work the next day, and I turned the date over on my calendar, and there's a business card sitting there. I wonder where that came from. How'd that get there? I just put it in my holder, went about my business, went in the next day, turned the date over on the calendar, and there's another business card sitting there. I was like, okay. And then I ended up looking, and there was a business card stuck in every single day of the week through the end of the year. And this was like April. I didn't know if I even had that many business cards in my holder to actually fill up the whole calendar. Well, I'm thinking my staff is playing a joke on me, so I call everybody in, and I'm like, who had time to do this? Obviously, you don't have enough work. They're all kind of gave me this blank look. I was like, what are you talking about? So I sent them on their way. Not too long after that, a resident had gone out of the country. She went somewhere like Indonesia or some wild place, and she brought me back these little lovebirds. Not real ones, but beautiful. They've got all this glittery stuff on. They're just gorgeous. And of course, they came from overseas, so I love them. Put them on my credenza, and a couple days later, went in and they're missing. And I'm kind of freaked out because this was a gift, and I loved them. I was like, I wonder what happened to them. I had the whole entire staff, my housekeeper, my painter, my porter, my assistant maintenance, everybody searched that clubhouse top to bottom. And they were nowhere to be found. Well, about noon, my maintenance guy decides he's going to lunch. He runs to the quick trip, grabs a burrito, starts to throw it in the microwave, and there they were, inside the microwave. He's laughing and giggling, swearing, Teri, I swear I didn't put them there. So there's all kinds of weird stuff like that. So I go to my boss, and I'm like, okay, there's something weird going on here. I really think this place has got something, it's haunted or something. And she was like, you're crazy, whatever. I've always been into this stuff. I watched Twilight Zone growing up and all those good shows, and she was waiting on me one day. My boss was waiting on me. It was my birthday, and I had hair down to here, and I got it all cut off because she wanted to see. So she was waiting for me at my office before I got back from my hair appointment, and she said while she was sitting there waiting for me, the back door, which was a wood frame with all glass in the middle, so there were, you could see if there's somebody on the other side. She said that the door handle started jiggling real violently, and she thought maybe there was an elderly woman or man or a kid on the other side that couldn't open the door. So she went over and walked around the corner to go to the door, and it just swung open by itself. She was like, okay, you might be right, but don't say a word to anybody. So it was kind of weird stuff like that going on. We could be sitting in our office doing work, and we would hear the toilet lid slam down. The very distinct sound of a toilet lid just slam. We would, my housekeeper went in one morning, and she was always the first there. She was there about 7:30 in the morning. And we had a door back on the kitchen because there was rooms back there that kept filing cabinets and sensitive materials, so there was a lock on it. And she went back there to open up for the day, and she could hear a woman moaning and crying behind the door. She was really scared. She thought maybe one of us had been attacked the night before and left there all night. She said she was trying to open the door, her hands were just shaking because of the moans coming from the other side of the door. And it scared her. And when she finally got the door open, the moaning stopped. Every single cabinet door was wide open. And all the styrofoam cups for the coffee were thrown all over the floor. She quit. She didn't like that at all. So I was, thinking there's dots and something going on here. There has to actually opens old murder cases. He investigates old case files. And there was a murder that occurred on that property 10 years prior, and they had just reopened the case. I found that very, very interesting. They opened this case, and all of a sudden, all this weird stuff starts going on. This poor soul was so restless and wanted justice for her murder. And so when they opened this case, all this weird stuff started to happen. And there's this young girl, she's 24 years old, she worked at Woodland Hills Mall in Tulsa, and she's supposed to meet her mom for breakfast one morning, and when she didn't show up, Mom called the police, and they went to the apartment, and it was brutal. It was horrible. There was a lot of struggling, you could tell, because the detective told me there was stuff strewn all over the apartment. He said that it was pretty bad. The perpetrator shot this poor young girl with her own gun. She obviously went to her dad for protection, and he shot her with it, or she. And they also had dragged her body, they killed her in the living room, and dragged her body into the bedroom. And they propped her up against the bed, laid her head back on the bed, and fanned out her hair and her own blood. Cut off both of her breasts and degutted her private areas. The detective told me it was so bloody and so horrible that there's absolutely no way somebody could have committed this murder without walking in and walking out, because they would have been covered. And it's a very, very sad story. And they actually, when they reopened this case, they believed, because this young girl that was murdered started dating this boy. And this boy had this crazy ex-girlfriend who was a cowgirl. She wore nothing but size 8.5 rubber boots and Wrangler jeans. And the blood prints all over the apartment were size 8.5 rubber boots. So they knew it was the crazy ex-girlfriend, but of course back then it still is circumstantial evidence, and they didn't have DNA. This was back in the 80s. So they didn't have the DNA evidence that they have today, so that's why they had reopened the case. They went back in the apartment, scraped some wood fragments, because once there's blood somewhere, it just never leaves. Tried to pin the murder on this chick while she was in jail in Texas on unrelated charges. And unfortunately, that case is still unsolved today. They couldn't prove it. And she and the young lady who was murdered is still there. The manager of that property now is a good friend of mine, and then she says, yeah, I can't sit and pay bills, because she stands right behind us, and she helps me too. There were several times I had to pick up my work and take it home. It was so intimidating. I had taken a picture in the clubhouse one day. We used to use Polaroid cameras. And when I'd taken this picture, I had one picture left in the camera itself, and I gave it to my leasing agent so that she could go take pictures of the images left in an apartment. And because there was one picture left in the Polaroid, I just kind of turned around and took it of my assistant, just being funny, and let it come out. And it came out of the camera, and it was this deep dark blood red color. And, you know, Polaroids come out, they're kind of a gray. And I thought, well, that was kind of strange. I put it back on my credenza. I put a new cartridge in the Polaroid. And when I did, all 10 pictures came flying out one at a time. Boom, boom, boom. I kind of sat there, my leasing agent sat there, my sister sat there with her mouths open, just kind of sitting there going, what in the heck? All of those pictures came flying out of the camera. They were all over my office, had that same blood red color on them. I opened another cartridge in, kind of stood there for a minute. Everything was fine. I sent her off to do her thing. I picked them all up off the ground, threw them away. Wish I hadn't. Because I went to that picture that was on my credenza like a day or two later, because it fell into some paperwork. I totally forgot about it. And there was a young lady, a negative image on a Polaroid, which is almost impossible to fake. Actually, Polaroids are impossible to fake. But there was a negative image of a woman, and she's standing like this. And she's got hair about my length and a striped shirt on. You can see her from the waist up. I believe that was the young woman who was murdered there. And she was definitely making herself known to us, especially with that case being reopened. When I looked up the obituary, when I got the information from the detective, and I went and I did some research on my own, and I looked it up, her obituary pictures like this, and she's got a striped shirt on. It's almost a mirror image. It's pretty crazy. So that's how it got started. I don't mean to start off on a dark note, but that's how it got me started. I saw that picture and I'm like, holy, I know what this is. Went to the internet, there wasn't anybody around Oklahoma at that time. Tanya and I started about the same time. There wasn't anybody in Oklahoma doing paranormal research. And I found people in Texas and California and all over the place, but there wasn't anybody locally. And I saw that picture and I was like, okay, I've got to do this. And it became a calling at that point. So that's how I actually got started. That was back in '98. Now I started PIT, which is the Paranormal Investigation Team in Tulsa, in 2000. I worked here in Oklahoma City for a while with some colleagues, and they encouraged me to start a team in Tulsa, and that's kind of how we got born. That's how PIT started. In the beginning, every orb was a ghost.